If I told you there was a magical solution that could lower your cholesterol, improve your blood sugar and blood pressure, support your digestion and hormone-based symptoms, reduce the risk of certain cancers and the risk of dying from many chronic illnesses, all the while helping you live a long and healthy life, you'd probably pay a decent chunk of change for it, right? I'm naturopathic Dr. Ann Hussain, and this is Phase to Phase, the Hormone Health Show. I'm going to kill the suspense right from the get-go and tell you what this not so magical solution is. It's fiber. Technically, you could drop a chunk of change on fiber supplements because there's so many fiber supplements out there, and we will talk about the Metamucils of the world later. But first, I want to actually talk about fiber beyond gut health. The first thing that most people imagine when the word fiber is said is pooping, digestion, and a gritty slurry. And I do want to make sure that we give this unsung hero of your heart health, your overall health, and longevity the attention it deserves, because we do need fiber for more than our gut health. We'll still talk about our gut health too. I'm recording this episode in February. It is Heart Health Month, and heart disease continues to be the leading killer of women in Canada. Not just that, fiber, like I mentioned, is important for longevity, and I'm talking about true longevity, the kind where you actually have functionality and agency in the long run to do all the things that you want to do and live a healthy life. This longevity comes down to the things that aren't particularly, quote, sellable, unquote, in a world driven by capitalism. So, buckle up, especially if you're in your car listening to this episode. I'm going to break down why fiber is the best thing you can do for your health and longevity, how you can figure out how much fiber you're getting in a day, and I'm also going to give you practical tips to get closer and closer to the daily recommended intake for your health without eating cardboard. So most Canadians, and I'm talking upward of 60% of our population, do not hit their daily fiber targets. For women, the daily recommendation for health and well-being is around 25 to 30 grams per day. According to the Canadian Digestive Health Foundation, most Canadians are only getting about half of that, so 10 to 15-ish grams of daily fiber. And I see this exact trend in my clinical practice as well, actually. Most of my patients, when we start tracking their fiber intake, they're having around 10 to 15 grams. And sometimes it's even my plant-based patients. And I say plant-based patients, or I call them out specifically, because fiber comes from plants only. And you're going to hear me say this multiple times in this episode, because if there's one takeaway I want you to have from this episode, it's that fiber comes from plants only. And the way we increase our fiber intake is by incorporating more plants. I actually think that fiber needs the kind of PR campaign that protein has received in the last few years. I want to see celebrities. I want to see influencers talking about how cool it is to get around like 30 grams of fiber in your day, but without the gimmicks and without the grifting. When we think about protein, like, I'm not knocking on protein. Protein is super important. I think we all know this. But I think what has happened is that protein has taken the limelight at the expense of fiber. Because if we look at the kind of protein that has been prioritized in the online space, and also the kinds of protein sources that we think of immediately when we hear the word protein, and how we're taught about protein and what, quote, superior, unquote, sources of protein are, it's animal protein. And animal protein is completely devoid of fiber, because fiber comes from plants. The latest iteration of the Canadian Dietary Guidelines actually specifically have recommended more plant-based sources of protein in your diet. Part of this is that they're lean in nature, so plant-based sources of protein don't have a lot of fat associated with them, especially saturated fat, the kind that is solid at room temperature, found in high quantities in things like red meat, and associated with an increased risk of heart disease. Plus, these plant-based sources of protein also offer fiber, as well as all the other things that come along with the fiber, like nutrition, like vitamins, minerals, fuel, carbs. And fiber actually is a carb, and we'll talk about that in a minute too. If we look at studies on long-term health and disease prevention, fiber has benefits on its own, but it is often also used as a proxy for plant food intake, as in it is a reflection of how much plants people are eating in these types of studies. And more plant foods in your diet long term has been associated with improved health and well-being and lower risk of chronic illnesses like heart disease, cognitive decline, and certain cancers. The benefits of fiber, if we're looking at it a little bit more granularly, include cardiovascular ones. So it lowers LDL cholesterol, it improves blood pressure, it improves insulin resistance and blood sugar regulation, which is important for diabetes. And this includes gestational diabetes, actually. It's also associated with lower CRP, which is C-reactive protein. It is an inflammatory marker associated with your cardiovascular system. And fiber also improves satiety and can be part of a weight loss regimen. Then there's the digestive effects of fiber. So it improves constipation. It can also improve diarrhea. I know we don't think about fiber for diarrhea, but because fiber has an impact on gut motility, so how slowly or fast things are moving through your digestive tract, fiber is actually important for bowel movements overall. It offers fuel for your intestinal cells in the form of short-chain fatty acids. It's really important for your gut microbiome as well. So the bacteria in our gut are constantly changing their populations based on our dietary intake of food, including plant foods and fiber, as well as obviously everything else going on in your health and life. Then fiber also can decrease cancer risk, especially digestive cancers like colon cancer. Then we also think about fiber for our hormones and hormonal health. And it's not necessarily like a linear relationship. Some of it works by way of what we've already talked about. So for example, if we take PCOS, fiber improves insulin resistance and improves metabolic health, and thereby also helps hormonal health. Fiber-rich plant foods have also been implicated in improving PMS symptoms and improving endometriosis, fibroid, as well as perimenopausal changes. Then for our hormones and hormonal health, we know that fiber intake becomes even more important in the perimenopause transition because we normally and naturally see metabolic change. So staying on top of fiber intake can help with perimenopausal symptoms, but also set you up for success when it comes to your blood sugar, your blood pressure, your cholesterol levels now and later. Even for something like PCOS, where there is a lot of metabolic dysfunction, fiber is important. High plant food intake in general, and it's not necessarily the fiber component, but the whole sum of the plant foods, the increased plant food intake is also important for endometriosis, for PMS, and for fibroids. So fiber really is important for all parts of us. And if we look at large-scale studies, similar to what I was just saying a couple of minutes ago, we do see a lower risk of death from all causes, so what we call all-cause mortality, when we have high fiber intakes in populations. And here's where that fiber is probably acting like a proxy for overall plant food intake, as well as diet quality. Now, if we move on to thinking about why North Americans have such low intakes of fiber, it's multifaceted, and I'll share a few reasons. By no means are they exhaustive, and I can only touch so much on like the systems, but it is partially a systems problem. And the best way to display this is through the ubiquity of ultra-processed foods that are hyper-palatable and low in nutritional value. And there's lots of big corporations and lobbying and advertising that comes along with these kinds of foods that have their fiber stripped away, their nutritional value stripped away, and they have added salt, sugar, and fats to make them hyper palatable, meaning that it's very easy to eat a lot of them. They give you a quick hit of fuel. They're convenient. They're oftentimes priced at a point where it is accessible to a lot more people compared to fresh produce, and they have a long shelf life. So these foods, these hyper-palatable, ultra-processed foods low in nutritional value, they are consumed quite readily in the North American diet. And here's where I'll just give you a disclaimer. Ultra-processed does not automatically mean unhealthy. Ultra-processed foods also include protein powders, which have great nutritional value, can give you an easy and convenient way of getting protein. Fruit yogurts are also in that category, but those foods are not the same as like potato chips or cookies and things like that. So that's the difference I want to just point out there. And this is part of a systems issue. Then there other reasons include like how we learn about diet and nutrition. It's usually through our families, through school, and out in the wild. And especially in this day and age, we're learning more and more through the internet. And depending on who we're learning from, we're going to learn slightly different things. When it comes to fiber, we haven't ever been taught how to have more fiber in our diets. We think of Metamucil most of the time. And this is where the education piece is very important and the context is important, because even when patients go to their medical doctors, they're told, hey, have more fiber, but no context is provided, no resources are given as to how to exactly do that. So there's like that piece that's missing. Then there's something that we already talked about, which is the prioritization of protein that has happened in the last little while, and mostly through animal protein, and that is inherently devoid of fiber. And then there's the carbohydrate piece of this conversation as to why people are not getting adequate fiber. So if we look at the diets that have been popular and popularized in the last decade, like the keto diet, they have been low carb. And when we go low carb, we're automatically cutting out fiber. Fiber is, in fact, a type of carbohydrate. And I think this is a good place to talk about fiber and what it is. So fiber is a type of carbohydrate found in plant foods that your body can't actually digest. It passes through your digestive system pretty much as is. The two broad categories of fiber are soluble fiber. So this is softer kind of fiber that's found in things like oatmeal and beans and apples, and they're called soluble because they dissolve in water. Some of you may have heard of prebiotics like inulin. That actually is a subcategory of soluble fiber. The second broad category of fiber is insoluble fiber. This is like the roughage that contributes to bulk and is found in your hearty vegetables and nuts and seeds and in wheat bran, not brand. And ideally, we do want a variety of fiber by eating a diversity of plant foods. And that's really how we can get closer to the target of 25 to 30 grams per day. It also makes sure we get a full complement of our other nutrients. Now, certain forms of fiber can be more fermentable, contributing to gas and bloating, not in everybody, but in certain individuals. And sometimes there are certain foods that are high in fiber that can have other compounds that can cause gas and bloating in individuals. I'm specifically thinking about IBS, people with IBS, so irritable bowel syndrome. We actually do want to be conscientious about what kind of fiber is being added in, how fast we're going, and how you're responding. It's best to work with a healthcare provider who knows what they're doing so that they can guide you slowly and specifically so that we're not aggravating your symptoms. So we've talked about what fiber is, why it's important, and now I want to leave you with ways to audit your fiber intake and incorporate more fiber in your life. This is not medical advice. Talk to your healthcare team, especially if you do have digestive issues or if you've tried and you haven't successfully been able to do it, because the term fiber, we're talking about a gigantic group of compounds, so we can fine-tune some of that for you. Now that we've talked about what fiber is and why it's important, I want to leave you with two things. One, how to actually audit your fiber intake, and two, ways to incorporate more fiber into your life, some considerations for you. Most of us have no clue what our starting point is, and that's what we need to establish first. And to do this, we'll have to start by recording or tracking what you're eating on a very regular day or a very regular few days. You can do this for however long you feel comfortable with, but one day, especially if you eat fairly similarly day to day, is a great starting point. You can input this into an app that you might have on your phone if you've tracked before, and then it will spit out the approximate fiber intake based on whatever you've inputted. You can also throw that into your day-to-day eating into an AI model of your choice if you wanted, and ask it how much fiber you're getting in a day. There are fiber calculators. I could only find ones from like companies, like commercial ones. You're most welcome to put in your search engine fiber calculator and use one of those. You can also obviously talk to like a dietitian or nutritionist, someone who's well versed in diet and nutrition, to help guide you, especially if recording is very difficult for you. If you have a history of eating disorders or disordered eating, please do that with a healthcare professional, because I know tracking can be triggering for some people. Now, once you have a number, or once you have an idea of how much you're getting, then we can move forward. If you're getting 25 to 30 grams, then great, celebrate and carry on with your fiber intake, and do make sure that you're getting it from a variety of sources. And then if you're not at 25 to 30 grams, the goal isn't to jump from 10 to 30 grams. It really is to increase it slowly over time, especially to have your digestion not act up and adjust to the increased fiber intake. So if you're at 10 grams, you can try doing 15 grams and then moving on to 20 grams and then moving on to 25 grams. Going slow and adding in more water, especially if you're someone who consumes low amounts of water generally, is good practice when you're adding in fiber. Some of the symptoms that can come up if you're adding in too much fiber too fast, or if there are certain high fiber foods that don't sit well with you, some of these symptoms include bloating, gas, bowel consistency change, and discomfort. So those are things you're looking out for. And again, talking to a healthcare provider can be really helpful, especially if you are someone who struggles with digestion in general. Now, I want to give you some quick, easy ways of adding 5 grams of fiber, what that might look like. I want to give you some examples. So, half a cup of raspberries, 5 grams. A tablespoon and a half of chia seeds, 5 grams. Chia seeds especially are a kind of fiber that we want to add more water with. A cup of cooked broccoli will have 5 grams. A third cup of chickpeas and lentils have 5 grams. Half a medium avocado, half a cup of green peas, a medium pear or apple, and a tablespoon of psyllium husk powder. And psyllium husk, again, is one of those ones where we want to add more water. At the top of the episode, we mentioned a common fiber supplement, Metamucil, which has psyllium husk. And psyllium husk powder actually has been shown to improve blood sugar regulation and other cardiometabolic parameters, especially at around 10 grams or 2 tablespoons a day. It's a source of fiber that can actually help with constipation and diarrhea. And psyllium husk powder is very easily available. You don't have to get a brand name. You can actually get a no-name or alternative brand, or even in bulk at bulk stores. Fiber supplements in general, they can be really helpful in terms of convenience. If you struggle with fiber intake, or your food intake is irregular for whatever reason, just like a protein powder is a convenient way to get protein in, a fiber supplement can do that as well. But because fiber is such a general term and refers to so many different compounds, it's best to talk to your health team to understand if there's a particular kind of fiber supplement that would be helpful for you, or even a particular kind of fiber that you need to avoid based on a condition that you might have. Now, I want to end this episode by giving you an example of a day with around 30 grams of fiber and what that can look like. So if you had half a cup of rolled oats made with half a cup of raspberries and a tablespoon of ground flax seeds, that gives you around 10 grams. And obviously you add other things to that, like protein and liquid. Then let's say you have half a cup of lentils or beans at lunchtime, whether that's in a chili or soup or salad or however you're having it. That gives you another approximately 10 grams. Then you have an apple or pear snack. That gives you 5 grams with the skin. So you've already hit 25 grams. And now if you add in a little bit of vegetable and a little bit of carbohydrate of some kind at dinner time, you have likely reached 30 grams. So spreading out your fruit and vegetable, grain, legume intake over your day is a great way of hitting your fiber target. A good place to start is picking one meal or one part of the day where you can add fiber. I have a great blog post on fiber that I'll link in the show notes. I'll give you a couple of other resources from the Heart and Stroke Foundation as well as the Canadian Digestive Health Foundation to get some inspiration from and just learn a little bit more about fiber in general. Check out the show notes for that. There you have it, a whole episode on the unsung hero of your heart, your gut, and your longevity and hormones. My biggest takeaway for you is to have more plant foods because fiber only comes from plants. Make sure to share this episode with everyone you know because we all need fiber for our health. And check out the show notes with all the resources wherever you get your podcasts or at face2face.ca.